Growing up in East Asia, the first dose of misogyny I've ever experienced in my life actually did not come from society. It came from my own mom. Perhaps it is for this reason that I find misogyny from women especially hard to endure. For example, out of all the anime I've watched, the number one scene that strikes me as the most misogynist is actually not the notorious fan service scenes. It's a character, and a female character actually, Ritsuko from Evangelion. Oops, sorry, not her mother, Naoko. In the story, Naoko and her daughter Ritsuko, despite being one generation apart, both fell in love with the same guy, Gendo, albeit Ritsuko fell for him only after her mom had already passed away. Unfortunately, both of these quote-unquote romantic episodes ended terribly as they were both one-directional, unrequited, because Gendo has a wife, had a wife. His wife passed away, but he still loves her and never moved on, so much so that he made a clone of his wife, Rei. Naoko felt jealous of Gendo's undying love for his wife, so she retaliated against Rei the clone, who at that time was still a child. Now, all this might already sound pretty messed up, but that's not even the worst part yet. Daughter Ritsuko also feels bitter that Gendo doesn't love her, so she takes revenge against him. But during the action, the computer system in which her mom's personality is imprinted refuses her command, and Gendo attacks her instead. Before she passes away, she realizes that her mom had chosen him over her.
Mother, how could you choose your lover over me?
In other words, her mom would throw her own daughter under the bus for this nonchalant dude who doesn't even give a crap about her. Now, you could look at this and say, considering the story was written by a guy, maybe this is just a nonsensical character symbolizing the writer's own male fantasy, that women would fall head over heels for an aloof guy. However, the sad reality is, in Japan, or let's say in East Asia in general, it's actually not rare to spot women like Naoko. Women who, despite being women, are unable to act in the interest of women. For example, in the Japanese entertainment industry, there's this really weird practice that whenever a married male celebrity gets in a scandal, mostly involving cheating, his wife will come out and make a public apology despite not having done anything wrong. In 2020, the Japanese entertainment industry was shocked when a very prominent comedian and TV host, Ken Watabe, was caught cheating on his wife with multiple women. Adding to the disgust of his behavior was that his affairs were carried out at public multi-purpose bathrooms, which were supposed to be reserved for people with special needs. Like, bro, you could have at least used a hotel. Anyhow, what followed was the standard Japanese apology package. First, you issue an apology through your agency, then you go on a temporary hiatus. Then you hold an apology conference where you shed tears or attempt to shed tears. Now, you're not going to believe this, but one extra step in this package is the wife's apology. Just a few days after the scandal, Ken's wife issued a public apology on her Instagram, apologizing for the inconveniences that her husband's actions had caused. I know many of you must be confused, like what does the wife have to do with his mistakes? But for those who follow Japanese entertainment news, wives apologizing is a staple, almost as routine as putting jam on toast. Each apology sets a template for the next wife, and if the next wife doesn't apologize, it feels like something is missing. This willingness for women to cover up whatever mistakes a male celebrity makes is prevalent in Korea and China as well. In Korea, perhaps the best example is the recent Kim So-hyun case, which has been turned into a meme icon at this point. So this case is in a hot mess now, and I don't want to dwell on the specific details, but I do want to talk about one fact. Back then, when Kim Se-ryung posted this photo of them being together, hinting that they had dated, nobody believed the girl. Despite them looking obviously intimate in the photo, his fans did not believe they ever dated. Instead, they accused her of seeking clout, believing that their So-hyun oppa was somehow manipulated and staged by her to take this photo together. Note that the majority of these fans are female, which is just history repeating itself. Just as in almost every past scandal, fans consisting mostly of girls would go out of their way to defend their idols, hence the famous phrase, "Oppa didn't do it." And in the Chinese entertainment world, which I'm the most familiar with, it's the same pattern. Take the famous, or shall I say the infamous Chris Wu case for example. The allegations in 2021 were not the first time he's been accused. As far back as many years ago, other girls had already called him out for his shady behaviors. But again, not only did his fans support him fervently, the general public were on his side, believing that Chris was just an innocent, naive boy who was quote-unquote set up by these greedy, cunning girls seeking clout. There were even prominent female influencers taking his side, saying something along the lines of his fangirls should be grateful for the opportunity to sleep with him. And all of this leads to the big question I've always wanted to ask since childhood. If you're a woman yourself, then why can't you support other women? This leads us to part 2 of this video, how the social environment in East Asia kind of sets you up for misogyny. When talking about sexism in East Asia, the emphasis is usually placed on what a woman goes through as an adult, such as the gender pay gap or discrimination in dating and marriages, etc. However, misogyny is often instilled in our minds prior to adulthood, from every dimension of our social surroundings. And here, I like to touch on 3 major social surroundings: language, family environment, and media. First, language. As you all probably already know, the 3 East Asian languages are influenced by Chinese characters to varying degrees. It is one of the 3 major writing systems in Japanese, referred to as kanji, and although the Korean language no longer uses it, many Korean vocabs trace their roots back to Chinese characters referred to as hanja. Now, language being a powerful tool that shapes societal norms, what if some of these characters carry misogynistic undertones? Take the word xian, for example. It means disdain, dislike. It contains this radical as part of its composition. This radical means female, implying that disdain or rejection is tied to the female gender. This is not a coincidence. Most derogatory terms in Chinese inherently involve the female gender, constructed around the female radical. For example, the word 嫉妒, which means jealousy, are constructed around the female radical not just once, but twice, implying that jealousy is a female trait, that women are inherently prone to feeling petty and envy others. Another interesting example can be found in the term 奸臣, traitorous minister or corrupt official. In ancient times, ministers were almost always male, but when this word was coined, the female radical was used, implying that a traitor or a treacherous person was tied to the female gender, despite historically, treacherous officials were almost exclusively male. All these linguistic choices reflect this cultural tendency to associate women with negative traits such as being sly, being jealous, being treacherous, and malicious. So it's no wonder that whenever these SA allegations came out in East Asia, the first reaction from the public was almost always to question the female victims, suspecting them of deviously setting up a scheme to frame these innocent celebrities, because even the language itself reinforces the stereotype that women are inherently more devious, more deceptive, and sinister. As if this alone isn't alarming enough, let's move on to the next form of social environment, our family environment. Remember at the beginning of this video, I said my first encounter with misogyny came from my own mom? Let me explain. In my household, it's me and my sister, no boys. My mom always wanted a boy though, and has always complained about the fact that we were girls, that it is unfortunate to not have a male heir. And I'm like, Mom, I thought you were a woman yourself? Like, what? I wish my mom was the only person that thinks this way, but sadly, no. The male to female birth ratio currently in China is utterly out of proportion, suggesting that female infanticide is definitely in practice. A lot of people like to blame the one-child policy for causing the sex ratio imbalance, but guess what? After China ended the one-child policy and started allowing a second and third child, things got worse, not better. According to the recent population census, for third-born children, the national male-to-female ratio rises to 133 to 100. In certain provinces, it even reaches to 177 to 100, meaning for every 100 girls born as the third child, there are 177 boys born. So the ratio actually got significantly worse than the one-child era. Many kindergartens in these provinces are now reported to have predominantly boys and very few girls. In these families that practice gender favoritism, daughters are not even allowed to be born, and if she is born, from the moment of entering this world, she's already regarded as the inferior gender by her own mom, which creates this vicious cycle of mothers growing up in misogynistic environments, hating themselves, passing down that hatred to their daughters, so on and so forth. Another icky trait these moms have is a tendency to compete with their daughters for their husband's love. For example, this is a famous relationship advice channel that does live sessions. Once a mom called in and openly admitted that she felt jealous of her husband's love towards their daughter. As if this isn't messed up already, let's move on to the last form of social environment, media. Specifically, I want to focus on how East Asian media portrays women in relationships. So it's safe to say that most people start dating and getting into relationships at least in their late teens, say around 16, 17, 18 years old. Prior to that, with no dating experience, a major source of influence shaping our perspective on love is the media, with TV couples and on-screen romance playing the major role. And when it comes to TV romance, perhaps the most influential East Asian media is K-drama. Now, if you're someone into K-drama, you probably have heard of this concept called the second lead syndrome. It happens when you find yourself liking the second lead more and you root for him to be with the main girl instead. Examples of some popular second leads include Taekwon from School 2015, Sojun from True Beauty, etc. But have you ever wondered how come this syndrome only applies to the second male lead and never to the second female lead? Well, the answer is simple, because unlike the second male lead who's written to be liked, the second female lead is almost always a wicked, nasty character who exists so that the audience could hate on her. Although they are both tasked with the same plot role, which is to serve as the competing love interest, they execute their roles differently. The second male lead, despite feeling bitter, will never do anything truly bad that will harm the main couple. However, the second female lead will do wicked, nasty things that prevent the audience from ever rooting for her. She will resort to manipulation, deception, or even cruelty in order to try and win the affection of the main male lead. Take True Beauty, for example. The second female lead initially started off as a super cool girl's girl who was incredibly nice to the main girl. But as soon as she finds out about the romance brewing between the main couple, she immediately turns into this manipulative, wicked villain that would do anything to sabotage the main girl.
이런 식으로 관심 받고 싶었어? 이수호가 옆에 있어주니까 뭐 없던 용기라도 생겼나 보네.
Characters depicted this way in the media not only reinforces the harmful stereotypes that women are somehow more jealous and spiteful, it also perpetuates unnecessary female rivalry. Because thinking from pure logic alone, if you are unhappy about your relationship, shouldn't you communicate with or confront your partner? Why invest all your anger towards a third person? The way East Asian media portrays female rivalry creates a culture where women are often taught to focus their romantic frustrations on other women, which is practiced in real-life scenarios. Whenever a man cheats, his wife or girlfriend is more likely to fixate on the mistress, while the man who's actually committing the betrayal is rarely held accountable. So to sum this up, the social environment in East Asia pretty much primes you for misogyny. And here I'm only focusing on the predominant forms like language and family dynamics. I haven't even mentioned other problematic trends such as the toxic beauty standard in East Asia, because at least with beauty standards, you could technically ignore it if you are not interested in looks. But how could you possibly ignore or not use the language? How could you disregard or cut off your family when you are a child? It's as if society weaves this spider web that traps you from all sides. And thus, I'd like to ask this question. If from the moment of birth, women are conditioned by society, culturally groomed into misogyny, then is it even fair to call them out as pick-me girls? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comment section below, especially if you have similar experiences. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.